I don't back down for something because I'm scared. Is that courage? I don't let fear stop me.
Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Isan.
And I'm Erick Mertz.
And this is episode 170. It's getting really up there.
170. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
November 6th, 2024, as we record this. Today, we're talking about storytelling versus story writing with guest Anne Abel. I'll read her bio when we get to that section. First, we want to thank our existing patrons for believing in our work here on the podcast and offline. You can become a patron of the arts at patreon.com/Valerie Isan, IHSAN, and patreon.com/Strange Air Stories for stories in the paranormal mystery genre. For author updates, I'm having a lot of fun. Like, I don't want to say collaborating yet, but I feel like I'm opening up to opportunities from the universe in the writing industry, and that's been pretty exciting. I might be doing a little ghost writing, maybe. I might be
Maybe.
doing a little bit of I just got an editing job from this company in Canada that does Oracle decks and tarot decks. So I'll be their
Ooh.
editing team person. Yeah, so there's a lot of like little things that are, kind of sort of showing up on the edges that I'm getting excited about doing, and book ideas are formulating. And yeah, so things are kind of moving forward like that. I do have the Unlock the Heart of Your Memoir class that's coming up December 7th in Eugene, Oregon. It's all day long. We're going to talk about lots of juicy memoir stuff. It's going to be fun. And there's going to be writing exercises and prompts, and it's going to be cool. And I am just starting this week. You may have seen a couple of things on social media and the mailing list, if you're on my mailing list, about Embody, which is the new video series I'm doing on becoming more fit and living an intuitive life. And that's just going to be for paid patrons because it's going to be up close and personal and pajamas and no makeup and the real me. I've
Love it.
decided to become more real, hashtag be real, but I'm going to do it behind a paywall at first until I'm more comfortable with
You just that's another t-shirt for the whole line. It's like be real behind the paywall right there.
it. What's up with you, Erick?
Oy. Well, I mean, it's kind of the another week in writer life. Like I've been working on the short stories from Ghost Story Weekend. I wrote one, wrote half of another, and came up with the idea for a third. So I've been indulging those short stories. I don't know. I'm at that place where I feel like I'm constantly percolating, but I'm also like trying not to tie myself to anything, too long term for a while. I'm going to finish the novel that I've got almost to the goal line. It's almost there. But then I'm just going to spend the rest of the year, I think, finishing a lot of little things. And that's kind of, I feel like I'm neatening, making
Yeah.
more
And
neat.
I think that's kind of your like writing process. At the end of every year, you spend like a month and a half or so just sort of like finishing up this and finishing up that and
Yeah.
getting things ready for the next year.
Did we talk about that on episode like 128 maybe or
Oh, I don't
129? I don't
know.
know.
I don't have a Rolodex of on episode 2 we talked about.
Yeah.
No, I have no
I'm
idea.
also actively, we talk about paywalls. I'm actively reinventing what I do with, kind of all the Patreon thing, kind of that whole, you know, just trying to re-engage all that process and take a little more time with it. So stay tuned. More to come.
Nice. That's always exciting. I love new beginnings, and
Yeah.
it just gives me lots of new energy. I think
Mhm.
it's part anticipation and part like curiosity, and I don't know, just the the prospect of something new coming around the corner. I don't know. There's a word
Yep.
for that, and my editor brain is totally not having it yet. I haven't even
Mm.
finished my first cup of tea, so
Mm-mm. It'll come to you like 2 minutes before the end. You'll be like, oh, rewind back that word.
that
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
What about you, Anne? What's going on in your world?
Well, quite a bit actually. My first book was Maddie, Milo, and Me was published in April, and my second book, High Hopes, Bruce Springsteen and Me, will be published September 23rd, 2025.
Ooh,
And I'm working on a third memoir after that.
nice. Serial memoirs. I think that's the way to go. I like that.
Um,
Are you writing it? Well, no, I guess it wouldn't be. I was going to say sequentially, or is it like this topic and this topic and this
well,
topic?
to be honest, when I signed with She Writes Press, they told us we should get on social media.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked my dog walker if she knew anyone, this was a year ago, anyone who did social media. So she gave me the name of this 19-year-old CUNY computer science major, and he started doing social media for me. And this is really weird, but a month ago or 2 months ago, he sent out a questionnaire to people saying, what do you want to see with Anne? They had two things. They wanted to meet my husband and they wanted to see my apartment. And I really am not comfortable doing any social media, but he's this great kid and they said to do it. So anyhow, so he came over about 6 weeks ago and I hobbled through the apartment showing my apartment. He posted it 2 weeks ago and it went viral. And what happened, but listen to this, I woke up on a Friday morning, I checked my Instagram numbers and they hadn't moved in weeks. We couldn't, it would go up a little, down a little. And I looked overnight, it had gone up hundreds. And then I looked at my Amazon ranking and it was the low, it was like unbelievable. And so I wrote to the publisher and I said, I don't know if this is a mystery or coincidence, but my Instagram numbers went up by hundreds and the Amazon ranking is crazy. And then it just went viral. And then over the weekend it went viral and there were like 2,000 comments. And I didn't look at the comments, but then he said, Arseni is his name. He said, Anne, so many are saying they're buying your book. I've been pushing this book,
Awesome.
and it's really been surreal. So that was kind of, I mean, I had, who watches, but I had 15,000, I couldn't break 700 followers on Instagram. Now it's like 31,000, it just,
Wow. Now
hard to
everyone
get.
listening is going to want to know the name of your social media guy. Are you?
Well, he's a student, he's just a doll, but someone else asked and
So he's not.
I've been working with him for a year and he comes over every couple months for 2 hours and we 11 to 1 in out and we do it and it's great because I don't really have self-confidence and he's competent, he's nice and he's self-confident, so we're a great team.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's
Totally jealous.
crazy. Well, I'm really uncomfortable doing it, but I will do. But if it sells books and if this is what you're supposed to do, I'm trying.
Yeah, it's kind of the thing now.
It's interesting you talk. I tried to, I am actively looking at bringing somebody like that onto my business. And I interviewed this person who, office credentials, medallions on their website. And they gave me this very here's what we'll do. Here's what we'll do. It was very packagey. And then I interviewed my old neighbor's daughter. She's 19. She did social media for some of the neighborhood businesses. And it's odd. She has no credentials, no nothing, but I felt so much more at ease with the way
Yeah,
she was just talking about it like it was in her language, like listening to a chef describe something you don't understand, but you're
exactly.
confident, like,
Exactly.
okay, you're gonna poach that salmon. Great.
Right.
She was just on it. So
It's
I
just
don't
the
know.
Gen
And he's
Z,
so
I
great. Like
guess,
when
you
it one,
know?
and he'll just say to me, "Oh, Anne, this is social media. It goes up, it goes down. That's just the way it is." He's just like,
Right. Right.
so, it's great. So it's a really nice relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have to accept, I think, that our careers are based on fleeting currency at some point. It's just what it is. It's what it is.
Well, my children are in their 20s and they are not really on social media, like just fleeting.
Yeah, neither
That
am
you
My
I.
know of.
my
They may be on
youngest,
social media and they're not telling you.
that's true. My oldest is, but he doesn't, I mean, it's just mostly like regurgitating, talking about topics that are important to him. My
Yeah,
youngest is not on social media at all, kind of like he doesn't get his photo taken. He doesn't like, he's very private like that.
right, right.
So I can't go to my kids to find out how to
Get a neighbor. Go to
get a
start knocking on
neighbor.
doors.
I
Just
mean,
start
I'm on
asking.
social media. I like social media. I'm on Instagram all the time, but when it comes to like promoting your business, I don't know, like then it becomes like, well, what do I say? What hashtag should I use?
Even when I'm doing something notable, like at Ghost Story Weekend, I was like, I should post about this. I'm the writer in residence at a big event. What do I, but I still couldn't translate my experience to the action of like, oh,
Well, and
stop,
I
take a
will give
picture.
you a tip from my this um you want to call him a kid, but I guess he's not at 19. Arseni, he says you need to do videos. Videos
Okay.
are what reels. Static pictures just don't get it. That's what he tells me all the
Right,
time.
right. That's what I find myself doing when I get on social media is just like looking at the animated stuff that any reels or, yeah, makes sense.
That's part of the reason I'm doing this Embody video series is to get myself used to doing a little bit more videos so that I can just pop on Instagram and do an Instagram live or whatever, without thinking about it. So that's
Yeah,
part of my ulterior motive.
yeah.
I don't really have an ulterior motive, but anyway, what are you reading, Anne?
Oh, I'm having trouble right now. I just finished The Wedding People. I forget the name. And I thought it was going to be an easy read about a wedding, but it starts out the woman is suicidal and she goes to a hotel in Providence. She uses all her money, rents top suite, and she arrives and there's a wedding party and she rides up the elevator, it turns out, with the bride to be. And the bride says, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "Well, I'm going to kill myself tonight in this room." And the bride is, "You can't do that. You'll ruin my wedding." Anyhow, it's just a wonderful story about, and she becomes enmeshed and that how they help each other. And it was just a really, really wonderful story, really uplifting, I thought.
Hmm. Cool.
And I just finished by Natalie Sue. Um, I hope all is well. I hope this finds you well. That was an interesting one, and now I'm kind of stumbling around. Any suggestions?
Um, I'm reading an arc right now called Roland Rogers Isn't Dead Yet, which I'm really liking. It's really a fast, easy, read. It's told in two different points of view. It's about a ghostwriter that's writing a book for a ghost.
Wow. I was gonna say it sounds appropriate for you, but I don't think you're doing it for a ghost.
Yeah, and then I'm in a book club, so a happy pocket full of money is still on my list for the book club, and of course, the year of the puppy. I also had this. I really like Alexandra Horowitz. I've read other books by her, but I had the same experience where I can't seem to read it straight through. I pick it up and I read a chapter or two, and then I put it down for 4 or 5 days, and then I pick it up and read another chapter. And so I don't know if it's just, it doesn't like read like a reference book or anything. It's very captivating. And so I'm not sure why that is the case, but I have had that case. I've done that with both of the books I've read by her now. So it's in the it's in the stack. It keeps getting recycled in and out. So I'm also working on that one as well. And I have to say, Eric, working at the bookstore, I was processing the new special orders that came in yesterday, and somebody had ordered The Great When. Maybe it was a podcast listener. I don't know, but
Hmm.
looks fantastic. I can't wait to buy it.
It's such a weird book. I just finished it. Such an
Yeah.
awe. It brought me to this realization that like I need to start reading more books that are stylistic. Like the story is a basic portal fantasy, but it is Alan Moore writes with great style, great dialogue is all very nuanced. It's almost like James Joyce. It's and I don't read enough of that. I read a lot more, I don't want to say comforting books, but like I don't read things where the art, like clearly the art is in the language and the style. So brace yourself if you do pick it up. It is a clear, like it's just I can't read it fast. I mean, I was reading it at
Okay.
20 pages at a time, but it was worthwhile.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, and you can kind of see he was a comic book artist, and so you can see where that style comes from, this like very detailed vision of what the frame looks like and
Hmm.
so it had that feeling that you're kind of reading this piece of comic book art. So yeah, it was really
That's
good.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I picked up Lee Child's new book at the library because it was like, oh, a bunch of Lee Child short stories. This should be a bit of a palate cleanser. So I picked up, I think it's called Safe Enough.
Safe enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Bleed child.
And it was funny. I read the first one and it was like, I read it in 8 inconsequential minutes. It was like in my head. It was like story gone. It was the opposite experience of reading Alan Moore. Yeah,
Exactly what you needed. That's what a palate cleanser
exactly
is.
what I needed. Yeah.
Opposite of what you just read. Even if
Yeah.
it's the other way around, like, oh, too many beachy reads. I need, something with substance.
Yeah.
That can be a palate cleanser too.
Yep.
All right. Any resources, tips, tidbits from anyone before we get into the meat of the main topic?
I don't think so.
Silence.
Not a lot of, yeah. I don't think I don't want to offer like drum up advice. It's not real today. I don't know if I have it.
Today's a bit of a misnomer. All right. Anne Abel. Anne Abel's story about unwittingly rescuing an aggressive dog Milo won a Moth Story Slam in New York City. She's won 2 additional Moth Story Slams in Chicago. Her credentials include an MFA from the New School for Social Research, an MBA from the University of Chicago, and a BS in Chemical Engineering from Tufts University. She's freelanced for Lilith, Philadelphia Daily News, The Jewish Exponent, Philadelphia Weekly, Mainline Life, and Mainline Today, and formerly wrote a weekly column, The Home Front, for Mainline. Welcome, Matt. She also taught English and creative writing at the Community College of Philadelphia. She lives in New York City with her husband, Andy, and their 3 rescue dogs, Ryan, Megan, and Chase. She grew up outside Boston, Mass. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, we're going to be talking about your story slam stuff and the difference between telling story and writing story. So let's just start with the first obvious question that I came up with, which was like, how is it different for you?
Storytelling was life-changing for me. I suffer with severe depression and severe writer's block. And I went back and got an MFA midlife career change in the late 90s. And I freelanced. I could write anything an editor asked me to do. But if I were to sit down, if he said, go write 2,000 words on the tree in your backyard, he'd have it, words, time. But if I looked out the window and thought, oh, I like that tree, I'm going to sit down and write about it. Within a minute, I'd say, so what, who cares? And that would be it. Then in 2014, I took this improbable but life-changing trip to Australia alone to follow Bruce Springsteen's High Hopes tour. I suffered with severe depression. I'd been inpatient twice, had ECT, 2 regimens there, and then I had another regimen outpatient. And I'd been teaching at the community college for 5 years. It was great. It gave me the structure, focus. I really loved it. And then the 5th week of the semester, this particular year, I just had the worst. It was violent. And after having 1 desk too many thrown at me, I walked out the door and thought I'm never coming back. But as I said, I suffered with depression and I was afraid without the structure and focus of the classroom, I would be back. I was not going inpatient. The 3rd ECT regimen had been disastrous. I was not doing that again. So as I'm driving home, my kids are grown, we live across the country. My husband travels, and I just was panicking. And as I'm merging onto the expressway, desperate times call for desperate measures. I thought, I know this is October. I'll go to Australia in February and follow Bruce Springsteen. Now, a year earlier, I didn't even know what a Bruce Springsteen was. At the age of 59, I had never been to a concert. In my family, we didn't do fun growing up. And then my son and daughter-in-law, just at the last minute on Labor Day 2000, I think it was 12, came to visit because they were going. Her mother, she had grown up listening to Bruce Springsteen, and he was in Philadelphia. They said, can we come to Philadelphia? I was thrilled. Do you want to go to the concert? Absolutely not. But that morning, the only thing that helps me with my depression is working out. And that morning I got on my bike and I'm listening to the golden oldies that my husband put on. And I thought, you know what? I want to go because I want to spend time with them. So we went. And again, they had just gotten married 2 months earlier. I didn't remember any of the wedding because I had been undergoing ECT and it affected my memory. We had to stop it, but they were showing us all the 3,000 pictures on their phone. And then as the crowd mysteriously rose in unison, I rose too. And up on the screen was the face of a man with the biggest, kindest smile I had ever seen. And for the next 3+ hours, that man's energy, enthusiasm, and humanity lifted me. The next 3+ hours, Bruce Springsteen made me feel like I had a chance. So I went to some local concerts. So when I was really grasping for how I was going to save myself, I thought, I'll go to Australia. And I hate to travel. I hate to be alone. But I went home and I booked the trip the next day and I was dreading it. I don't do the F word, which is fun, except when I was at a Bruce Springsteen concert. I was terrified. I was going for the structure and focus. I wasn't going to change. And a month before the trip, I suddenly realized I didn't even know why I liked Bruce Springsteen. And in 4 weeks, I was going to be traveling 16 hours alone on a plane. So I sat down and Googled him. And I'd never watched a YouTube video before, but it was the first thing at the top of my computer. And I clicked on it, Super Bowl 2009. And there on a halftime stage, surrounded by a football field of clapping fans, Bruce Springsteen took the mic, stared into the television camera and said, is there anybody alive out there? Chills went running through me. I went on this trip. As I said, I wasn't going to change, but I came home with a ball of positive energy I had never had before. And when I told the travel agent I wanted to do only 3 things in Australia. I want to see 8 concerts, I want to work out, and I want to write. And I wasn't surprised by the first 2, but I hadn't thought about writing in the 5 years I've been teaching. I was just happy to be teaching people about writing and reading. But my will to be happy, and I think my will to survive had just bubbled up. And I said, right. And then 12 friends and acquaintances and family asked me to write emails to them and let them know how the trip was going. And that was all I needed. That just gave me the green light. And I ended up being in the same hotels as Bruce Springsteen and a lot of the band. But that I would sit down, I'd read my newspapers at breakfast, and then I would write emails for 2 or 3 hours to not just about Bruce Springsteen, but I was doing a lot of thinking. I was alone there and I was thinking about a lot and I was writing to people and I was coming up with all these great stories and I couldn't wait to get home and tell people my stories. And I got home. No one wanted to hear my stories. No one. And no one wanted to see me with this positive energy. They just wanted to see the depressed person that I've been. And my husband had been having trouble at work for a couple of years, but I'd ignored him. And then I finally said, it's his problem. But I said, you've got to get out of here. Teaches at Penn. I said, you've got to get out. And within a day, he got this visiting scholar at the University of Chicago. So in January 2016, we drove out there. It was 8 degrees. I signed up for improv. What do you do if you're in Chicago? And I pretty quickly failed improv. I just couldn't do it. And I came home and I said to my dog walker, what do you do when you're not walking dogs? she said, well, I host a storytelling open mic. You should come and do one. And I'm like, well, I will never talk, but I'll come and listen. And I knew I had one story. One story was about my trip to Australia. So I went and three men were telling stories at this open mic. One about how he had cheated on his fiance with three women at Woodstock back in the day. One man got up and talked about how hard it was for him when his wife was in labor because she couldn't pay any attention to him. And the third one got up and talked about he abused his first two wives, but now he's a new man and he has a new wife, and really super self-congratulatory. And I
Wow.
never do stuff like this, but I turned to my husband. And they asked me when I came in, do you want to sign up? I'm like, no, no, no. So I just turned to my husband. I said, I can do better than this. And I thought of this story from 40 odd years ago when we were trying to get pregnant. And I got up and I said I'd never stood in front of a mic. And I said, I came here to learn how to tell a story about Bruce Springsteen, and everybody cheered. And I said, but instead I'm going to tell a story about sex. And they cheered even louder. I just told this anecdote that had popped into my head. It was 4 minutes. And afterwards, all these people came up and they're like, oh, that was great. You should do more. And so I worked on a 7-minute story because that was what these open mics were about going to Australia. And I got up and I told it, and people just really responded. And then I started to work on a few other. It was different writing a 7-minute story than sitting down and writing a long piece. And people started inviting me to be in curated shows. And then someone said, you've got to go to the Moth. And I had never even heard of the Moth. And then they said, and you're going to have to tell a story. So I actually ended up winning a story slam telling the Australia story in Chicago. Then I won a story in Chicago about my upbringing. And then I wanted to hone my storytelling skills. So I contacted a coach. And the first thing she said to me was, if I could wave a magic wand and grant you one wish, what would it be? Which really surprised me. I thought she'd want to know my storytelling goals. And just without thinking, I said, write a book. And she said, well, then that's what you've got to do. And I knew she was right. And I knew I had this Australia story. And for 3 months, I couldn't do it. And I was getting more and more angry with myself and more self-loathing. And as I said, I work out every day. I'm very disciplined. I get on, I don't question it. I just do it like Nike says. Finally, after 3 months, I couldn't stand myself anymore. I thought, okay, after you work out, you're going up to your desk and you're going to sit there for 2 hours. And I had probably 800 pages of emails that I had from this trip, and I had put them in a binder. So I just sat down and I started at the beginning. And then anything that came into my head as I was writing, I would put it in there, any anecdote, because if I started questioning it, I would just have nothing. So I ended up, that first draft was 1,000 pages, and it's coming out next September. It's 380 pages. And then I came to New York and I really wanted to win one story slam in New York City. And on April 1st, the theme was bamboozled. And I thought, well, I've got a story for that. And I told the story about Milo adopting this monster of a dog. And that won. And people, in the next month, I went back to this Moth, and I heard this young man and was with his girlfriend. And he said, I was here last month, and this woman told this amazing story about adopting her dog. I was like, I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, that was me. And people would come up to me for months after, like they wanted to know how just a regular person like me could actually have managed this dog. I mean, they were so curious. So at one point, an editor, this is during the lockdown, had the Australia story, and it was taking her longer than usual. And a friend of mine kept saying, write about Milo, write about Milo, write about Milo. And I said, I can't, because I have this horrible writer's block. But then I found 50 pages I had written like 15, 20 years ago. And I started with that. And I soon had a beginning, middle, and end. And it just seemed like a much more straightforward story than the Australia one. So I decided to try to get Milo out into the world and then come back to Australia. And that's what happened. So storytelling really unlocked me. It was the positive feedback. You get this really immediate positive feedback from people.
What about that 7-minute story framework? I want to go back to that. You said that, if you sat down and were like, okay, I'm going to write a story, you'd get that writer's block and the self-confidence would just disappear and everything would kind of halt. But when you had a framework of, okay, I've got to fit this story into 7 minutes, it's kind of like that structure that you said you needed in everyday
Right.
life. So
And the
it's
moth is 5 minutes. The moth
okay.
stories are only 5 minutes.
So
Yes.
what is how did, I'm trying to go into the
Okay.
weeds here.
I
Like, how
never
many
met a,
words is 7 minutes?
I,
How do you
I
fit
don't know.
something into
In
seven
5 minutes,
minutes?
it's not, and I never met a detail I didn't like, but, so I mean, but, but it's less daunting and you can get up and you can try it, these open mics were great. And, they talk about beats. I took a storytelling workshop in the basement of an apartment, and that's for the 7-minute story. The man he had started this string of open mics across Chicago, and he had this workshop that he gave for 6 weeks, I think, or 8 weeks, 8 evenings, 8 Monday evenings. And you just start talking, and you just see how far you can go. Or, you have certain points that you want to make, and you have to kind of mesh them together. But it's like an outline, kind of like writing an outline,
Mm-hmm.
I think what it is. And
So you write the outline of the
no,
story beats and then just get up and kind of
well, some
practice and see
people
how
do.
long.
That's not how I did it. I would tell myself the story over and over, and then say, okay, um, like the Australia story, it would begin after having one death too many thrown at me. Basically the story I did, like what are the absolute key things that people have to understand? And I know when I got up there and I said, I'm standing there at the mall and I'm like, yeah. And I suffered with depression and everybody's kind of yawning, like, okay, yeah, so tell us your sob story or whatever. And then I said, and so I came up with a plan. Go to Australia and see, and so that really wakes everybody up. It's not what they're expecting.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it's a lot different going to Australia at the age of 60 alone. If you don't like to travel and you don't like to be alone, and you didn't know what a Bruce Springsteen was a year ago. Like if I'd been a lifelong fan and I loved to travel and, the whole thing, it's like, okay, that sounds like a fun trip. But, it was like, what are the key things? The key things are that I was 60. I don't like to be alone. I don't like to travel. And I did not know what a Bruce Springsteen was a year ago. So those, you get that up front. And then, I mean, as the story goes, the deal was sealed. I was doing it. And then the voice in my head said, you're doing what? Anne Abel, you are so pathetic that you have nothing better to do with your life than chase an aging rock star across the world. And it's true. That's what happened to me. I did it. I had the itinerary. I didn't even look at it. I just stuck it in my drawer. And then that's what happened, I just felt like such a loser, that this was all I had to do. And do you know what? When I left on this trip and people and my friends and family, they all rolled their eyes like, oh, it must be really nice to be able to just fly off to Australia and follow Bruce Springsteen. Oh, no one understood that I was fighting for my life. And I get on the plane, and the first thing the flight attendant says is, why are you coming to Australia? And I was so embarrassed to tell her. I had a little wedding band on, and I was so glad I did, because at least she'd know that at least one person didn't think I was a kook. So I told her what I was doing, and to her eyes, she perked up and she said, you're so courageous. And she said, does Bruce Springsteen know? But this happened over and over as I was traveling. I got young people like at the health club would say to me, what are you doing here? And I told them, and a few of them said, oh, my mother was a teacher and she got tired of the phones and the whole thing, and she retired, but we can't get her off the couch to see a movie, and they would look at me with awe. And I was shocked because this was not how I was brought up. It's not what people were doing to me at home. And each time I got one of these comments, I would step out of myself and try to look at myself through these people's eyes. And also the concerts, like any art, you see it through your own eyes. Everybody sees a painting or a sculpture or a concert, they hear different things. This was before Bruce Springsteen's memoir came out, and I didn't know he was depressed. I hardly knew who he was. There was something about him that gave me energy. But I would go to these concerts, and like one night he just paced back and forth across the stage saying, how do we do it? How do we get through the day? He's going back and forth. And I'm thinking, wow, like if Bruce Springsteen is on a stage saying this to 60,000 people, I'm not the only one feeling like this. And I get the chills just, like remembering, like there's something, and other people get through the day, and Bruce Springsteen gets through the day, I can get through, it was just really validating to have Bruce Springsteen on stage, saying that, saying these things. I mean, he was fun too, but there were these moments that were just really made me feel, first you feel it, and then you think, or I had never, I don't, I'm not, besides I had never had fun before a Springsteen concert. I say I don't do the F word. I, I'd never dreamed. My parents scripted everything about my life, and all I ever wanted to do was do what they said. So I never dreamed about what I want. I never dreamed. It's just not something I did. And one night for the encore, he just came out with his acoustic guitar, and the light was just shining down on him. And he started singing a cover of his Dream Baby Dream. And I felt like he was imploring himself to dream, like he was begging us and begging, and it just really lifted me. And I walked out there that night like, maybe I can do this. I mean, the next morning I didn't feel it, but once you've felt the feeling, then you can think about it and try to work your way back. So for a few reasons, this trip actually, it really changed it changed the trajectory of my life, which I didn't expect.
I'm having flashbacks to my first Bruce Springsteen experience. I'm definitely, I love Bruce. It's been a 40-year journey with Bruce, and that he has a power to him. I remember going to a lecture at the University of Oregon in 1995, where one of the religious studies professors was just talking about the songs of Bruce Springsteen as sermons. And he just went through like a bunch of songs that I had loved. And I'm getting chills just thinking about it. Like he'd go through songs from like, Born to Run, and like albums that I'd stolen from my dad that were now in my apartment that were no longer in his possession. I just remember feeling like, right, like there is just something like
Right.
there is
Right.
something open-ended and like revelatory in a Bruce Springsteen song that other artists just do not do.
Did either of you see the movie Blinded by the Light?
Oh my God, I love that. I
Your
actually,
story kind of reminds me a little bit of
yes.
that
Oh,
movie.
I saw that when I was starting to write this, and I was like, oh my, it was so inspiring. I actually wanted to get the kid who's in the movie, who it's about, to do a blurb for my book, but I didn't get far with him. But yes, that was amazing. You just, it affects, he affects people in so many. I forget what song, but there's one song, it's kind of like a revival. And one of their names are all blanking out, but that's like raise your hand, and I actually wrote to, I'm Jewish and we belonged to a synagogue back then, and I wrote to my cantor and I said, what's the difference between a Bruce Springsteen concert where they're saying, get up, and a high holiday service where you're standing there singing and like, trying to invigorate all of us. I mean, it can be very spiritual.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
totally.
A lot of things. It's a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's my sister got Born in the USA, the record, because she liked that song and quickly was like, this is not it wasn't what she thought it was. And it was when I put it on at like 9 years, 9 or 10, I just remember feeling like,
Wow.
whoa, this is mind-blowingly good. Like all
Wow.
these
That's
songs are
amazing.
so just I don't know, and it's the same. He does the same instrumentation too, just not even from a lyrical sense. Like it's never there's never a gimmick. Bruce is
Right.
never like if
Right.
there's never been a gimmick. It's always this. It's just energy
Right.
and and
I read a
and
review that said
performance.
he has no pyrotechnics. And
Mhm.
Well, he is the pyrotechnics. I mean,
right.
he is. Yeah.
That first concert, I was standing there way up high, and he was down there, like a little speck, but I could, the energy just radiated. I was watching him tap, 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 strum, 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 and the energy just radiated up and through all the fans, everyone there. And I was actually dancing. I mean, I'd never been to a concert before, and there I am in my little, place in front of the seat dancing. And the woman in front of me, like, oh, here's a story. So in Australia, at my first concert, I'm up there and I'm standing in my seat. And he says something, get off your arses. And, at some of his concerts, he says that. So I'm standing up and I'm dancing, and I feel a tap on my back. And this woman says, you're blocking my view. You can't stand up. So I go to the aisle and I'm dancing there. And there was a few, and then after a little while, the usher sends me back. And then we went back and forth. And I guess it was just a thing. And then at one point, I'm out on the aisle. This is me dancing. Now, remember, I didn't know, I'd never been to a concert. I didn't know what a Springsteen was. And I feel a tap on my back in the aisle. And I turn around, and it was this young woman in her 30s. And she said, I just want to thank you. I wanted to stand up and dance, but I was afraid, but I've been following you. Thank
Mm.
you. And we
Mm.
hugged, and it was like, there I am in Australia, all alone. And I get the chills remembering it. It's just there's so many moments like that just um, stayed with me.
Yeah.
But at that first concert, I'm sitting there alone, and there's an empty seat, and this kid comes, right before the concert starts, and he said, "Oh, I worked down the street. My boss was supposed to come to this concert, but his son is sick, so he gave me the ticket." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, that kind of makes us opposites, because I can't, I left home 4 days ago to get here for this concert." And then my favorites, I know this is really tacky, and if you know Bruce Springsteen, one of my favorite songs was um A Sunny Day. I just like it. And then that song came on, and I turned to this kid and I go, I know this is a really tacky song, but I love it. And he goes, no, it's not tacky. And it just made me feel good. It was just nice of him because I'm a lot self-conscious in it. Like made me feel okay about bopping to Waiting on a Sunny Day.
Hmm. These are awesome stories.
I'm racking my brain if there's another artist in contemporary music that could have that effect on somebody, and I just don't know if there's anybody that would be
I
like
started
Bruce.
because I ended up going on E Street Radio a few in October. I got back in February. I ended up on the trip meeting Barbara Carr, who is his manager from the beginning, basically. And that's another story in my book. I mean, that was a whole nother thing, but she invited me to come to her daughter had died of cancer 21 years earlier, and they had a fundraiser every year. So I went to it. And there was a silent auction. I'd never done a silent auction before, but there was one where you could co-host live from East Street Nation with this guy, Dave Marsh, and we bid on it. It wasn't very much money. And I was so excited. I thought this would be a way to keep the Bruce Springsteen energy going. And then we get home. I listened to the show, and this guy, Dave Marsh, was a total asshole. Someone would call up and say the sky is blue, and he'd say, "You are such a jerk." It's not. It didn't matter what anyone said. And I was totally intimidated. I had a really severe father, I mean, male figures like that. But so I was going on in October. I spent from June, July, August, September, just learning everything I could. It started out to learn everything I could about rock music. I started one morning, I just sat down, I Googled Bruce Springsteen, and up popped when he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And Bono inducted him. So I Googled Bono, I downloaded his albums, I did the Wikipedia pages, I printed out all the Wikipedia pages, and we were at the beach that summer. And I never went to the beach with my dogs, but I would study these things for like 3 hours. And then I would take my three little dogs to the beach. And on the way out, I would listen to the first day it was Bono on the way out. And on the way back, I'd listen to Bruce Springsteen for inspiration. And day after day, I just kept going, whoever, Jackson Brown. And then I realized that it's not that clear cut. And I started going down, all the way down to jazz and gospel and rap. I went to see Jay-Z and Beyonce that summer. I saw Elvis Costello, who was a total fucking asshole. If you know what I would say.
I love Elvis, but man, I have heard some bad
Not a
stories
nice
about
person. I will
not a
tell you
nice
that.
person.
And I have to
He's a
say,
bad
when
tipper,
I was
I've
in
heard.
Australia, people who had worked with Bruce Springsteen, like, the whatever, they'd say how nice he was. And I don't think, look, I don't think he opens his window in the morning and screams out, "Is there anyone alive out there?" But he has a stage persona of this, kind, energetic person. And I think if I had found out that he was not a nice person, that would have just really not been, I don't know. I don't think I could have followed him. And I went to this Elvis Costello concert, and he was really mean to this 80-year-old woman who was sitting next to me who tried to give him a rose for his birthday. And I just got up and left.
Oh.
And we went to a Tom Petty concert back, and he just looked like he was just checking in and checking out, and so many of them were like that. But Bruce Springsteen, like from the first concert, like, he's 3 years older than I am. And there he was, like, just going, not taking a break. And I thought, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And, you just get the feeling that one of the first concerts, the second or third in Australia, he comes on. And then and there was a man, an 80-year-old man next to me with his son had brought him to his first Bruce Springsteen concert. And I said, "Oh, you're going to love this. It's going to be great." And Bruce Springsteen comes out, and after like once, he just sits down on the stage and he just starts yammering and yammering. And he's like, "Oh, if you had told me an hour ago I was going to be here." And it was like no energy. And I caught eyes with this 80-year-old man, and he says, "This is not at all impressive." And then, clearly Bruce Springsteen was working through some issues, and everybody just kind of sits down and is like, you're just sort of sitting there. And then little by little, you don't even realize that he just starts, it's like he came from the ashes and he just kind of rose up. And you're rising up with him. And again, I get the chills on this one too. Like you were at the bottom you were at the depths with him, and now with him, you're rising. And at the end of the concert, this 80-year-old man said to me, "That was an experience of a lifetime." But he, even when he's like down, like he manages, the crowd was kind of quiet. And then, it's like, you know what? He does a magic trick on stage. And I actually had I was in the same hotels. I didn't want to meet him because I liked him the way he was on stage. If I met him in person and I didn't like him, like it's like the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain. Like I didn't want to find out that the man behind the curtain was this curmudgeonly. I didn't want to take that chance. And for me, it was good enough to just see him being this person on stage that resonated with so many different people.
What I'm
I feel like when it's
loving
record time
hearing.
today, it's going to be Bruce.
What did you say, Eric?
I said, I feel like when I get to the time of the day when I go to put music on, like, I don't know how I'm going to look past the Bruce Springsteen record. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of plotting what I'm going to listen to.
So, Anne, what I'm hearing a lot of is a lot of courage and connection in your stories and in your path and your journey and your travels, and also that it's the courage that leads to the connectivity. And that seems to be really important. Like that seems to be a really great takeaway for me anyway.
Well,
Way to grab that theme. Good
I
job.
want to say, I do not, I once was trying to get a contractor to help me in New York from Philadelphia, and he said, "Oh, Anne, that's not in my comfort zone." And I said, "Stan, I live outside my comfort zone.
Oh,
My comfort zone is getting into bed with my two dogs and my husband. Everything else I do is outside my comfort zone." And I was terrified of going on this trip. Really, I know this sounds really horrible, but if I could have just disappeared from the world instead of going on this trip, I would have done that. But one thing about me, I told my kids on my tombstone, I want them to write, "She tried and she tried and she tried." And I will do anything I can to try to make myself feel better, to try to move myself forward. And this trip, I had no choice. I wasn't doing more ECT. I was 60 years old. I decided I knew myself as well as any mental health professionals. I needed to do something different. And I was I was not going for fun. And but I did it because it's almost like I had no choice. You know, the I mean, I really suffer with depression or getting up to at the moth, you can't, I've never been on a stage like that. The lights are coming at you. You can't see the audience. Of course, I was terrified, and and the moth is great in that. I mean, it's a great setup. I don't know. You go, you put your name in a hat. You don't know if 20 people have put their names in the hat or five, and they call 10. There's 10 storytellers a night, but they call them. They pull it out of the hat after each storyteller. They call another one. So you don't know. Like this Australia story I told, I was the 10th storyteller of the night. And you could just as easily go home and not have gotten called. But it's so it really keeps you, the adrenaline. Or if, like my name's Anne, they call Andy, you're like, oh my God. But it's a great format, I think.
so would you not define your acts as courageous?
It's, people say that to me. I'm not very good at compliments, but courageous, I don't back down for something because I'm scared. Is that courage? I don't let fear stop me. I don't. My sister was working in a prison with someone doing meditation, and then the woman retired, and they asked my sister to do it, and she was afraid. And I just, you know what? I would be afraid too, but I jump and then I figure out what I have to do. Like that would have been an opportunity for her. Yes, it's scary, but you just do it and you figure, that's what I do. You just figure it out as you're going along, and I do my best. And I
Mhm.
say that to my dogs all the time. All we can do is do our best. That's the best, that's how I try to reassure myself. But so if courage is doing something even though you're afraid, then I guess I have courage.
I also hear another slight theme going through the scene, or maybe a metaphor anyway. Like you were saying, just jump and then see what happens and figure it out along the way. And it seems the same way in your writing too. Like you said earlier about don't question what comes out, just spill it out, just jump and see where it takes you. And and if you stop and think about it, then the writer's block comes back. So you just you just start.
When my kids were
Just
growing up,
leap.
they'd want to go for something, but they were afraid, and I'd say, what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? You fail, this happens, what's the worst? Just do it. Just do it. And I love that Nike that, just do it. It applies to so many things for me anyhow.
Mhm. Excellent.
Love it.
Well, are there any other, we're coming close to the time when we have to end. Is there anything else that you want to talk about, Eric? Do you have any other further questions?
No, I think
This has been so lovely and
yeah.
inspiring, and I've really enjoyed talking with you today, Anne. This is lovely. I have your book here too. I
Oh my
want to,
gosh.
yes, Maddie, Milo, and Me is your first memoir about adopting the aggressive dog. and how that changed your life. And that was the one that's won the Moth, right? That
The one in New York City, yes.
Yeah. So the Moth Story Slam in New York City. Yeah. This memoir for those on YouTube is the one that started as a winning Slam story. And then the next book, the Bruce Springsteen book is coming out in next
September
year.
23rd, 2025, his 76th birthday.
Oh, neat.
High Hopes
That's
was the
cool.
tour that I went on, and it's called High Hopes. Bruce Springsteen and me, I guess you could say I have a brand coming along.
That's awesome. I can't wait to read all of this. The Bruce Springsteen one is definitely going to be pre-ordered whenever the pre-order comes out.
We don't even have a cover yet, so and I'm trying to get, oh my God, licensing for the lyrics.
Oh
Wow.
gosh.
Yeah.
Well,
I hope that comes through.
As an editor, I just tell people don't put lyrics in your book,
Don't put
but
it in there.
yours might have to have them. I don't know.
I have 17 sets of lyrics, and the woman doing it, she said, "This is taking longer than usual. You might want to revise." And I'm like, "Can you tell me which songs?" She said, "Okay, don't start revising." No, I don't know.
Well, I hope you get the licensing rights.
absolutely.
Because I really would like to read that. All right. Well, is there anything else you would like to plug? Where can people find you online, Anne?
And Anne Abel author.com is my website, and I think there's links to social media. There's links to where you can buy Milo and Me, and there's the Moth Story Slams are on there, and some other stories that I told.
Nice. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.